I decided I'm going to do a half lap joint. So what I did was I marked this, the thickness of the side pieces, because that's how they're going to fit together, because this is the thickness I need of the panel. So I marked that so I know how far to go back. So here I'll be cutting this out and this out. Now to figure out where the center is, I got the cutoff piece. And I had the cutoff piece, and then I took the speed square and I measured how deep it was. And then I looked, you always have your measurements on there, and I just took what half it was and then marked it. And then it looks like it's in a good place. And then with it unplugged, I was able to put the square on here and adjust the table saw to fit there. So now I'll make a couple of test cuts in the scraps I cut off from the pieces I'm going to use, so they know they're the same length. So I'll just cut a few passes, so it only, maybe about 2-3 different blade lengths in there, and I can lay them over top of each other and see how they should line up and feel like one solid piece. It is make a cut through it, and so you're cutting off a little piece, and flip the board over and cut in the same spot, and see if you leave any ridge, or if you don't cut in the same spot, you should be able to see if you're leaving a little piece in there. You can come up. If you're overlapping, then you'll know that you're too deep. So that's one thing you can do. So I'll do that as a test cut first. I'll go in here, and what I'll do, come around here. So I'll take and I'll pass this through, make a cut right about there, and then I'll flip it over, because I'll have that line. I'll line it up with that there mark I have there, which is the edge of the saw blade, and then I'll make a cut and see what it looks like. Best to try it on a scrap piece instead of doing it on pieces you're going to be working on. And of course, now you got to clear your table saw off before you start anything up. Now here's my first test. As you can see, I got a little piece in there, so I need to crank it up about half the distance of that. So I'm going to go just a little bit and then see what that does. So I'm going to turn just a little partial turn on the saw, and then we'll run it through there again and see what it does. Well, I made a few passes, turn up just a little bit at a time, and then I was able to get the cut, and you can see maybe just a little bit of ridge, but that's probably from not getting it lined up perfectly. So now I'll take my test piece and I'll cut some on here and see if I can join them together. So I'm going to cut back halfway through, maybe just a little bit so I can tell. I'll do that on one piece, I'll do that on another scrap piece, and line them up, because if you look at them when they're put together before we cut them, they're the same height there, so I'll know when I have it. Okay, we made the cut. I actually cut both at the same time, but there's just a little bit of ridge. This one's just a little bit higher, but if you look at it, there's a little bit of roughness in here on both sides. So I think just smooth it out with a little file, and I think we'll get a perfect fit. And now once we get that perfect fit, then we'll start cutting our pieces for our frame. We'll have all the half lap joints done, and now this is what it looks like. Now I just need to fasten them. I'll probably use construction adhesive besides the fasteners, because it's going to be outside, and I want to make sure it'll stand up to regular wood glue. Is not going to hold up to being outside in a wet environment like this. So if you're going to depend on glue, you got to use something that's going to stand up. Epoxies work good, and construction adhesive, but we still need to do a mechanical fastener in there. So that's our frame, and we'll check it and see how well it looks for being straight or square. We'll put the drywall square up here and look down here, and we are looks like we're nice and square. So now just go ahead and fasten those together. Well, I'm going to have to cut a little groove out of here to put the paneling in, unless I want to just go ahead and put it on the outside of it, which I could do. I just kind of don't like the edge of the plywood down where it's going to get wet. The other option would be to recess it down into this side. That might work pretty good too. I can recess that, but I'll have to think about how I want to do that, because this is not very thick plywood. This is only 3/8 plywood, so it's not very thick. So we'll do that. But anyway, we have a square frame. I've got some clamps to put on it, so we'll clamp it in place, and we can let it cure up, and then we can screw it down with screws. We need to make sure we get the right length screws so they don't go all the way through. But I'll put some construction adhesive on each of these joints here, and I'll flip this one over, put a little bit on here as well to make sure I get it on the sides and get it coated really well. And then I'll put them together, start clamping it. So let me get them going, and we'll come back, and then we can use this square to make sure it's square, as well as the other little speed square I had. So we'll make sure it's square, and we can also measure diagonals and see if those are the same too. So first step is done, got the adhesive on. So I'm going to take these and line these up and put these back together, and then make sure they're all square. Put a couple clamps in the corners to hold it together. With the adhesive, I don't need, a lot of squeeze out like you would with regular wood glue. So we'll get those clamped up, and that'll be the next thing. I got some long clamps so I can tweak it if I need to get it in the straight. Well, I got it clamped up. Of course, a little bit of it squeezed out, and I kind of wiped it off a little bit. So I made sure it was square. It's nice and square, and I measured the diagonals and the cross members, so it's the same on that end as it is on this end, and same thing down here, and same thing down here. So now then I'll just wait for this to dry. It's just an adhesive. Still gonna put mechanical fasteners on it. I'll put a screw in there or something, or I may drill a hole, or I might just go ahead and cut the plywood to fit it, and then screw through the plywood into it, and then that'll help hold it together. Have it all clamped up, waiting for it to dry, and we've got the epoxy in there. Once it all gets dried and set, it'll stable, and then I'll lay it down on the plywood. We'll mark it out, and we'll cut it, and then we'll put some screws in to hold it together, and then we'll be ready to go put it out. And then we have the two pieces. These are the two side frames you'll see in a picture later that these fasten into. So once I get this set in there, I'll set one, figure out where to go, and then make sure I get the other one set, and then we'll have a good fit, and then we'll be able to just take the cover off and go when we need to get in there to do any work, and it'll keep the bigger critters out. It won't keep out like snakes and mice. They seem to always find a way in, but it'll keep the bigger ones out. Well, we have the frame. It's all glued up. I haven't nailed it yet. I've got a little 18 gauge brad nailer. I'm going to put some nails in the corners down here. But first I need to take some of the squeeze out. You can see the squeeze out right over here. I've got a fairly sharp chisel, and I'm just going to scrape all this off. And kind of hard to do one hand holding the camera, but it just slices right off really nice, and I'll get that all smoothed out. I'll do that on all the corners as well as the inside. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a router, and I'm going to set this bit with a bearing on it, and I'm going to route a groove around the outside of it. Then I'll keep testing the size, because it's not wide enough. The board is wider than what this bit is, so I'm getting my fingers close to it, but it's unplugged. It's unplugged, so I can do that. Other than the fact that these bits, they're very sharp. I've touched one of the really good ones and just touched it, and it sliced my finger one time. So I don't like to touch the carbide edge, which you can see right here is the carbide edge. So what I'll do is I'll do it in 2 stages. I'll route that around, and then I'll go down to the full depth. Because what will happen is, as I route it down, because it's not wide enough, it's going to leave a little ridge on the top, and that's hard to remove. So I could use a chisel, but I'm just going to route 2 passes. I'm not taking off so much at the same time, and we'll just have to go the correct direction, because you go the wrong way, it wants to climb. What they call a climb cut. You want to go in the reverse direction that it's spinning. So if the bit is spinning this way, then, which is what this does, you see this bit is going to spin this way. So when I put it down, it's spinning around this way. And if I go the direction that it's going, it's going to kind of take off. So you always got to go backwards. So on the inside, I would go around counterclockwise. Outside, it'd go clockwise. I'm not going to do it on the outside. I'm just going to do it on the inside. So let me go ahead and get this cleaned up, and then I'll come back when I get all set up, ready to route. Probably going to clamp it down a little bit or something here. Put some stops on there or something so it doesn't move on me. Have all the glue scraped off. The chisel, it worked pretty good. This happens to be a Cobalt one. And I'm not sponsored or nothing. But I don't know if you can see it, but there's a lot of ridges in here. Not a real high quality machining when they do them, but you can still get a good edge. There's a decent edge on this. I was able to slice this down. Of course, I've done a little work on it. Not as much as I'd like, because I'd like to get this cutting surface into a mirror finish instead of have all those ridges in there. But that's a different video. So now the next thing I'll do is I'm going to take the nail gun, and I'm going to put a couple in the corner, a couple of little pin nails, 18 gauge pin nails. That'll help hold it together. I don't get too far in here because I'm going to be routing a little ridge in here. However much that is, that's how deep I'm going to inset it. I was going to try and do something else, but this is going to be the easiest way. Just route around the outside. I'll square up the corners with the chisel, and we'll do that. So we'll come back when I get the router finished setting up, and we'll route the inside of it.